Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for being here. This COP, as we all have heard a million times, is the finance COP. We've heard that over and over. But when we talk about climate finance, the money we keep talking about, it's not just arbitrary numbers, right? We're talking about the lives of communities everywhere, the people that have done the least to cause the climate crisis, and live today and will live in the future if we don't change things, its worst consequences. And this is what this conference is about. It's about climate finance justice, what that means, and how communities are already organizing and taking action towards the just energy transition that they want to see happen. So first, to talk about the quality of the finance and what this means in these negotiations to open up our conversation, I'll pass the mic to Mariana Paoli from Brazil. She's Christian Aid's Global Advocacy Lead, and she's the co-coordinator of CAN International's Climate Finance Working Group.
Hello, thank you, and good morning. The new Climate Finance Goal, the NCQG, is actually a unique opportunity to ensure the ambition we need to keep the 1.5 alive and deliver the climate justice to communities, especially those based in the Global South, who are most affected by climate change and yet have done the least to contribute to that. And the NCQG, therefore, must meet the growing needs related to adaptation and loss and damage while enabling a just energy transition. It is about fairness and justice. And the new goal is a unique opportunity because it must ensure the climate finance at scale, but it cannot repeat the same mistakes we have seen in the 100 billion climate finance goal agreed in Copenhagen. Not only because it was insufficient, but because it was mainly delivered through loans, including expensive market rate loans, and went mainly to mitigation instead of adaptation. Now, the new goal must not worsen the debt crisis. We know that 3.3 billion people are living in countries paying more money servicing the debt instead of spending on health or education. It is really unfair. So it's vital that we must see much more climate finance in trillions rather than billions. And it's not just the quantity, but it's about the quality of this finance. So in this sense, the core of the new goal must be public finance delivered through grants. Because we know that private finance has a limited role in mitigation, often neglects adaptation, and is completely inadequate to address loss and damage. We know that only 2% of adaptation funding comes from private finance. For this reason, any big number that relies on private finance will be completely meaningless. Developed countries say, there is not enough public money, but we know this is not true. What we see is a lack of political will to deliver that. For example, during COVID, developed countries provided about 14 trillion US dollars during the pandemic. NATO countries are spending 2.64% of their GDP on military spending. While we compare, for example, with OECD figures, is only 0.33% on climate. So we know that the money is out there. And what we hear much more is that if we're really able to address tax justice through tackling avoidance and evasion, as well as look at innovative sources, which we're going to hear more about, it will be possible to provide public finance at scale, not just for climate action, but for development as well. In this sense, it's really important that developing countries cannot accept a deal that does not address their needs. We heard this like multi-layer proposals by developed countries, but it has been a distraction because it shifts the burden from them, who are responsible to deliver the finance under the Paris Agreement, to developing countries. We know it's their obligation to provide that. It's a reverse of narrative that's kind of mean and morally wrong, because what means is that climate finance will be guided by where profits can be made, not on the needs of developing countries, especially to the most marginalized populations. Moreover, we know that the private sector is not accountable to the agreement or the convention. Only governments are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. As a segue, as she said, there is no excuse. We know that the money is there. I'll pass the mic now to Nicholas Heringer. He's a member of 350.org's movement support team, and he's been involved in global justice and climate justice movements for almost 2 decades now.
Thanks a lot. Good morning, everyone. Indeed, I will try to focus on, where we could find the money instead of listening to the excuses of those who tell that the money is not available. Because this COP is indeed about making sure that the Global North will walk the talk and fulfill its historic responsibility. And yes, it involves paying up. It involves paying up for loss and damage. It involves paying up for adaptation. It involves paying up for the just transition. And which is why we're here in Baku talking about finance, right? And you might have seen that the negotiations are a bit complex, tough, sometimes blocked, because precisely the Global North government are reluctant to pay, pretending that the burden would fall on the ordinary people from their countries. Nothing could be further away from the truth. They're using this as an excuse for business as usual. And I would like to second what Mariana just said. The problem is the lack of political will. Who pays is a choice. It is not an inevitability. Which is good news, right? It means that there is an alternative. And let's continue with good news. There is another good news. There is a very simple yet incredibly efficient way to get there. There is an incredibly efficient levy, taxing the rich, taxing the super rich. And it's a great way to achieve climate justice, not only because of the resources that it would make available, but also because the super rich are directly responsible for social, ecological destruction and for climate change. And so if we tax them, we can both, block and unlock. We can block the destruction of our climate, we can block the destruction of our communities, of our health, of our air, and we can unlock the transition towards a cheaper, renewable energy system, towards clean air, towards healthier communities, towards a sustainable future for all. The question of who pays for climate action is at the heart of this COP, as we said. And it shall also be at the heart of the G20 next week. And in its search to become a global climate leader, Brazil should be supported next week in driving through an agreement on such tax at the G20. The UK, France, Germany, and all their peers from the Global North need to decide as early as next week to force the super rich to pay up. And that might be, the other good news is that we at 350.org are offering today a clear roadmap to the world leaders. We are launching a briefing paper, Tax Their Billions, How and Why Billionaires must pay up to fix the climate crisis, which is explaining why and how this could work. The report sheds light on the harmful activities of 8 billionaires, just to exemplify what the super wealthy class, the 1%, or actually in this case the 0.1%, is doing. If these people were taxed to pay, it would substantially boost funds for climate finance and public services. And let's be clear, they owe us, they have to pay. I had a chat yesterday with my 10-year-old daughter, She wanted to understand what is happening here in Baku. And I told her about the report, I told her about what's at stake with NCQG and financial levies. And it's not that complex, right? She understood very easily that if they are billionaires, it means that there are millions of people struggling for their lives to survive. She gets that, one doesn't go without the other. She gets that the existence of millions of people struggling with climate impacts, struggling with hunger, struggling with air pollution is precisely what enables billionaires to thrive. And if a 10-year-old can get it, then every single decision maker should understand this and, all the talk, make the decision that this involves and implies. But people like Bernard Arnault, who's, the infamous richest man on earth, the Batista brothers, or the heirs of the BMW fortune, don't want to pay their fair share. They don't want to pay their taxes. Yet we, the people, have to pay for the consequences of climate change that they create in the first place. So this is, like twice unfair. And this is directly connected to the insecurity question and to what Mariana discussed, because it has to do with the quantum, obviously, right? This tax would make it so much easier to reach a fair quantum. But it is also about the quality, because, such a tax would enable governments like the UK, France, or Germany to have all the resources that they need to pay, and they would henceforth have not a single excuse to try and defend other avenues, loans, or this so-called creative financial mechanism. No, they would have no excuse. They would have the possibility to do grants and to pay their fair share in the form of, under the form of grants. So of course, Bernard Arnault and his richest buddies and peers will never agree voluntarily to pay. And these people are not only super rich, they're also super powerful. So they manage to, talk governments out of these decisions, which means that they are failing us, that they are failing our children and the children of our children. But there is another, and that's maybe the final good news, right? That's people power. Worldwide, people are demanding justice. Worldwide, people are stepping up to hold governments and the super rich to account and to pay. And so the course of action is very clear. We want to increase momentum and political pressure from community level upwards to demand that the richest people in the world are forced to pay for building cheaper, renewable energy sources, to pay for insulating people's homes, to pay for repairing the damages done by extreme weather in the global south. We cannot do this alone, but we can do it together. And there is an irresistible wave. Yes, the waters are rising, but so are we. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolas. And as a perfect segue to this, as you said, people are organizing, and people are actually doing the job that governments are not yet doing, and speaking out of how they want this transition from dirty fossil fuels to clean, renewable energy, and how they want to access this energy. So now I'll pass on the mic to Ilan Zuckman. He is an activist and 350.org's Latin America and Caribbean director. Ilan.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Wow, we have so many lights and equipment on in this room, right? For us, it seems something ordinary, I think, but you click and it's on, right? But for so many people in the next COP, which is happening in the Brazilian Amazon, it's not like that. In the Brazilian Amazon provides about 1/3 of the electricity in Brazil, and about, even though about 1 million people, in its majority black, indigenous communities, quilombolas, riverine communities, still don't have access to electricity. And the people that have access to electricity there still rely on very old and dirty diesel generators and power plants. On the top of that, oil and gas production, exploitation continues to advance in the region, and climate impacts like the fires and extreme droughts continue to hit communities super strong in the Amazon. That's why today, in partnership with indigenous communities, with traditional people in Brazil, we are launching a campaign called Energia dos Povos, Energy of the People. In the largest rainforest of the world, the renewable energy revolution is way more than just installing solar panels. It's about human rights, it's about inclusion, it's about systemic change to enable communities to make their own decisions about the energy choice. We want to transform the energy policy to guarantee full access to electricity to communities in Brazil. I mean full access because communities need enough power, enough electricity, so they can have, for example, a freezer, a refrigerator in their homes. This seems ordinary for us, but communities need that so they can thrive for the economy from the forest. Community needs to be able to store the fish they catch from the rivers. Communities need to be able to store the acai pulp they get from the trees and really be able to thrive again for the economy of the forest, the so-called bioeconomy. It's time for Brazil, the host of G20, the host of COP30, to show real climate leadership and set ambitious goals. It's also critical for world leaders of the rich countries of this world to deliver on climate finance. To get people out of energy poverty in the Amazon, we need about $7 billion. We just heard from our two colleagues here about ways to getting that money. We must ensure that COP29 delivers in this new goal of climate finance. We must ensure the G20 next week happening in Rio, provide a strong messaging about taxing billionaires. We know where the money is, we know how to find it, but we need our leaders to put the money in the right places and in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We also had in our panel Lueni Caripuna from the indigenous people of Caripuna in the Wassa indigenous land in Amapá, Brazil, but she was not able to make it here in time. She is, however, available as a spokes after this panel. Our spokes here on the table are also available. We also have QR codes for the report that we're launching and can speak also about Energia dos Povos, energy of the people. And now we're going to open for questions in the audience.
Yes, hello, Alejandro de Kaiser from De Acero. So if you are proposing grants instead of loans, yeah, can you hear me now? Yeah. So if you are proposing grants instead of loans, what kind of safeguards need to be set in place in order to both empower developing countries, but also preventing corruption and that the money will be spent in other things that must be done?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite clear that grants-based finance is the solution for especially those areas where private sector can't reach, and it's really down also to not just for governments to access them, but also communities. So one of the key questions for the NCQG is to ensure that communities, local governments, CSOs can also access that funding. Linked to that is also the transparency and accountability, right? And a definition of climate finance, what counts, what doesn't count, who's providing, who's receiving. It's really important. Important to avoid the double counting because many times the ODA, etc., there's like double counting or other things like commercial loans are included. But for communities to have the right access to them, be it through the Loss and Damage Fund, GCF, and other UN mechanisms are definitely the best delivery. And there are mechanisms like ETF, the enhanced transparency finance mechanisms that can help do the tracking. It's really important that communities are able to establish and meet their needs. And that's the power of grants-based finance. It is possible to track. There's a lot of good initiatives happening already out there. What is lacking is really the funding to make it happen.
Any other question? Any other comments from our panelists before we finish the session?
I guess just one final comment. I think we really need to judge the outcomes of this climate finance negotiations on precisely that quality of finance. We're really under the risk if we lock in any magic big figure that will be dependent on investment or private sector mobilization. We're coming here out not only with an empty shelf, because we don't know if this money will ever come into place, but also we're shifting the burden from developed countries, who are meant to actually provide the climate finance under Paris and the Convention, to the shoulders of developing countries who might be blamed for the years to come not to have provided the enabling environments or not being good enough to attract private sector finance. It's wrong, and it's really shifting the narrative here. So it's really important that this COP delivers on what the Paris Agreement is all about. We know the money is out there. That's what this reporting is showing. Again, I just wanted to underscore is the political will that we're talking about here. We don't have any quantum yet from any developed countries on the table, and this is what is missing. We have another 10 days, 10 days to go, and we'll be campaigning and advocating for this to happen. Thank you.
And to build on that, I also just want to add that anything that would be based on loans is actually going to make the super rich wealthier. It's not going to solve that issue that we have either, because loans are obviously tied to financial institutions and to the banking system that heavily benefits them. So grants is also the only way that we have to actually redistribute wealth in a fair way.
Any other questions?
Hi, I'm Peri Diaz with Gigon. Yeah, I would like to ask, you talked about the importance of bringing renewable energy to the Amazon. And yesterday, the Brazilian government announced its NDC. And in their NDC, they talk about putting an end to fossil fuels, transitioning away, actually. And I would like to know what is the importance of, what is the connection between these two things? Can Brazil do this in the Amazon, for example? And why is it important to stop oil and gas in the Amazon? And how is this connected to the NDC in Brazil?
Ila?
Yes, thanks so much for the question. And yeah, yesterday was an important day. Brazil starting to show some leadership, was one of the first countries to announce its new NDCs. For the first time, Brazil put in the NDC the mention about transitioning away to fossil fuels, mentioning at least the word fossil fuels, referring to the paragraph 28 from the last decision in the COP text in Dubai. But still, even though this mention appeared in the Brazil NDCs, there's no any further mention in the NDC about how Brazil, or if Brazil will stop its plans to expand oil and gas. At the moment, Brazil has this idea of being one of the largest fossil fuel exporters in the world. By 2030, could be the top 5. So this is a huge contradiction for a country that wants to lead by example. The government is trying to show leadership. It's doing some important moves, but being the host of G20, being the host of COP30, Brazil can do more. Brazil has, of course, electricity metrics of more than 80% of renewable energy, majority of it coming from hydro. But the energy matrix of Brazil is still the majority dependent on fossil fuels. So Brazil needs to continue to step up, to lead by example. And even though Brazil has this big electricity renewable metrics, the way that Brazil was able to get that was through huge hydro dams that generates lots of impacts to communities. So that's why for us it's so critical that the energy transition in Brazil, and when we speak about providing renewable energy in Brazil, it's all about justice. It's not just about, as I said before, installing solar panels or installing wind turbines. We need the element of justice into that. If not, we'll be replicating similar models from the fossil fuel industry that are causing terrible impacts in communities. So we hope to see Brazil stepping up more and more in its leadership, but also bringing a very strong element of justice, participation of the civil society, and hearing communities. We just heard super strong demand coming from the indigenous movement. They want to be the co-presidents of COP30, and we hope that Brazil takes seriously this demand. It's time to hear and listen and learn from the traditional knowledge.
Yes, I have a question back there.
Thank you very much. I know that time is right now limited. My name is Carlos Perez. I'm the director for Latin America of Equal Right. And I just wanted to bring up the importance of the intersection also with the peace building and social cohesion part of the climate justice discussion. To bring a very acute example, right now in Colombia, there is a climate crisis around floods that is specifically affecting the poorest region of Colombia, which is Chocó. Chocó is the region of Colombia that has the most population of Afro-Colombians. The poorest region, at the same time, it's right now attacked by an armed group. And due to floods, they need to escape from their municipalities, but they can't, because if they do, they would get attacked. So when we talk about climate justice, we also need to consider the peace-building component, which we started talking about that during COP16 in Cali. So I think it's very important to also, when we speak about climate justice, to think about the delivery in terms of peace-building, and I would love to hear a little bit about your take on this. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we are unfortunately going to have to wrap soon, and it's a big question, but I've always considered that, to some extent, the climate justice movement should be acknowledged as the peace movement of our times, because this is precisely about restoring the conditions for peace by, bringing justice. I mean, we say, no justice, no peace. It's not just a slogan; it's the reality. So, restoring the conditions for peace means, healthier communities, access to water, good jobs, and the possibility to take back the ownership on your day-to-day choices, take back the ownership of the energy system, because it is that lack of ownership that we have that is enabling extractivism and all the violence that unfolds. So I can only agree with you on that.
Okay, thank you very much for having us here. If there are any questions, our spokes will be outside, and we also have QR codes here for the report that we're launching, Tax Our Billions. Thank you. Oh, sorry, the speaker that was going to be here as well, Lueni Caripuna, has arrived, and she will also be outside for interviews if anyone is interested. Thank you.